Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm joined by my usual broadcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw, who played for 11 seasons for the New York Rangers and Los Angeles Kings. This is the Laidlaw and Allen Report. We come to you twice a week to talk all things hockey, and today's guest is George Richards, who's the longtime beat writer for the Florida Panthers. He's now with FloridaHockeyNow.com, and if you need to know about what's going on with the Florida Panthers, and we all do this season, which is one of the reasons I want to talk about it. You need to check him out because no one knows that team better than George. And George, as I've looked at this team,
we've lost Kevin Aaron
for seasons, and then in this off season with the addition of Bill Zito, I've started to wonder how much of this year's success is Joel Quenneville changing the culture, and how much has it been Bill Zito, really revamping the roster?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's Bill Zito had to get Joel Quenneville some players to change, the culture, and I think that gets talked about a lot. I mean, every new coach that comes in, change the culture, that kind of thing. But it has been a problem here in Florida. And enough people from the outside or people who have been here and reflect back, talk a little bit about the country club. The guys enjoyed the beach too much and that kind of thing. But you look at Tampa, and they don't have that problem. They've got the same weather, and they don't have that problem. So something was going on within the organization, or that maybe there was a wrong mix of players. And I think that maybe that's what it was. I think they just needed to get some tougher guys, some guys who not only had won somewhere else, but were key parts of that winning. And I think that's something the Panthers had been missing. Years past, Dale Talon's always brought in guys with experience, guys that have won the Stanley Cup, but they were kind of role players and that kind of thing. And then, not that Patrick Hornquist will be ever confused for Sidney Crosby, but this guy, the way he plays, the attitude that he brings has really helped change the way the Panthers play the game right now. And they're leading the league in hits. The Florida Panthers lead the league in hits. I mean, that's unheard of. So down here. So, I think it's been a combination of both. And Bill and Joel both work together on, the players they wanted to bring in. And that's what they've done.
So that's the good stuff that's going on. I hate to be the negative guy, but Sergei Bobrovsky, I mean, he's got a winning record. He's 5-2, but his numbers, like, 3.18 goals against average and save percentage of .889. So what's going on with Bob?
Yeah, we don't know right now. Right now, Chris Driedger is the starter. I mean, there's no other way to put it. I mean, Driegs is going again tonight in Dallas. This will be his second consecutive start, and I believe fifth in 6 games. So he's taking away starts from the $10 million goalie, Sergei Bobrovsky. And usually I never, talk about guys' contracts and all that stuff. But this one, it's hard to ignore. It's the biggest contract the Florida Panthers have ever given out. It was, to bring in their own Carey Price, to bring in Vasilevsky, and Sergei Bobrovsky just hasn't been that. He's been fine in games. No worries about that. But he hasn't, put this team on its back, which was expected when you're paying a goalie that kind of money. For right or for wrong, that's what they thought. And it just hasn't happened. So I think Bob will get back to his old self, his old Vezina ways. He's going to give in some goals here and there. But, for right now, he's not starting. And, that's something that a lot of people are looking at right now.
George, you had brought up about Quenneville and Zito sort of working together and getting the right people in. When I think about George or Joel Quenneville, I think about, in Chicago when, Stan Bowman would bring in players and Joel would decide within a couple of weeks that he didn't particularly care for those players, and then they would sit. And I wondered how that was going to work with a new GM in Florida, because if to be a GM with Joel Quenneville, it's sort of like almost like an NFL situation where,
Sure.
in the NFL, obviously the coach is the spotlight guy and the general manager's in the background. And it's not the case usually in the NHL. The GM is usually the high profile guy. But in this case, Bill Zito's a new GM, and Quenneville's obviously has that pedigree. And is that how they're making it work? Is Bill sort of trying to bring Joel into his tent by giving him a say in all moves?
I really don't know. I mean, because we're not around these guys as much anymore to ask those kind of questions.
Right.
In normal times, yeah, we would have been BSing at training camp and in media, and we'd be talking about this kind of stuff. I have to assume so, right? I mean, because Joel Quenneville is one of the highest paid head coaches in the league for the Florida Panthers. You got to think he's got some input, especially when you know how close Joel Quenneville and Dale Talon were as friends, and this is the second time that Dale's been let go of a team that Joel Quenneville, had just finished his first year with. It happened in Chicago. It's happened here. So I would have to think that Joel Quenneville even had some say on Bill Zito being hired, because you don't invest that kind of money in your head coach and then hire somebody that's going to be, that are going to clash. You don't invite that in. I think that Bill Zito is a smart guy. Everybody that talks to him knows, what a smart hockey guy he is, but he's also a very good communicator. And I think, just knowing Bill Zito the way I do, I think for sure he's involving Joel Quenneville and stuff, because why wouldn't you? I mean,
Yeah.
Bill Zito's smart enough to know I got a Hall of Fame coach over here, number 2 in wins to Scotty Bowman. Maybe I should, give him a say. I'm sure that's happening.
Yeah, that'd be a pretty smart move. Yeah. So Quenneville come last year as his first year. It really didn't have the impact that I think a lot of people thought he was going to have. But obviously now they're playing so much better now. Do you think it took a full year for him to kind of, like you talked before about that culture, change the culture and the work ethic and the attitude?
Perhaps, yeah. I think he was as frustrated as ownership was last year. The team, listen, when they went to the All-Star break, their last game was at United Center and Joel Quenneville's return. They win that game. They're on a 6-game winning streak. They're in third place in the Atlantic, within striking distance of second. And the Florida Panthers are living up to the hype. They are living up to the hype. They've got some problems, obviously. And then they come back in February and are absolutely terrible for the next 5 weeks. And they couldn't figure it out. Dale Talon was walking around. He was just like, he goes, I've never seen anything like this. The team was good. The team now sucks. It just out of nowhere. And that's what led to the Vincent Trocheck trade. I don't know what happened last year, and I don't think Joel Quenneville does either. I don't know if it was a culture thing, if it was just, all the teams, weaknesses came to a head. But in 1 month, that very promising season turned into a major league disappointment, and it ended up costing Dale his job. So, they did do some cleanup. They did clean out some players. They did bring in some new ones. They brought in some hungry players. Carter Verhaeghe, a guy that couldn't, was a healthy scratch or a fourth liner in Tampa, is now a first line guy in Florida, and he's, second or third on the team in scoring. You bring in, Patrick Hornquist, Pittsburgh, you're too old. We don't really need you to bring him in. You put him on the first team power play. He's leading the team in goals. So it's been kind of an addition of players as well as attitude, and they seem to be pretty happy with the results, at least so far. But again, last January 31st, this team was on fire, and then they weren't. So,
George, I wanted to ask you, we were talking about Bobrovsky earlier, and the one issue that I see for them, in addition to the fact that, they're paying a lot of money for a guy that's now their backup goalie, is the fact that waiting in the wings is Spencer Knight, who's considered maybe the best young goalie outside the NHL. He has the option of staying in school and eventually becoming a unrestricted free agent. Do you think there's worry within the organization that with Bobrovsky sitting there on a long-term deal that he may choose to do that?
No, I don't think there is. I think that they've got a real good relationship with with Spencer Knight. They've got a real good relationship with Boston College. They just signed or they're going to announce that they signed the Hutsko kid, who is a senior, and if he would have waited till August, would be a free agent, and he's decided to sign with the Panthers. He's hurt for the season, so he's out. But anyway, I think Spencer Knight is one reason why the Panthers have kind of created this goalie alliance within the front office. You already had Roberto Luongo working in the front office. You're bringing in Francois Allaire to work with the goalies and stuff. And I think a lot of that is for the on-ice guys here, but also to develop goalies. There's always a concern when you've got a high-profile prospect like Spencer Knight, that he would, decide to spend, a couple more years at Boston College, live the college life, and, be a free agent at the end of it. But this is only year number 2 for Spencer Knight. That means he's got to stay another 2. I don't see it happening. I wouldn't be surprised if he's, if Boston College wins the national championship this year, that he comes out this year. Maybe he plays his junior year. I don't know. But I don't think nobody expects him to stay at Boston College more than next year. So I think it'll be okay. And then you got to figure out what to do because, yeah, you're right. Right now you've got 6 years left of Sergei Bobrovsky. Maybe you give Spencer Knight a year in the AHL and then he's the backup here and, the not so backup, right? Because we're seeing Chris Driedger's already beat him out for the job, at least right now. Who knows? So it's an interesting thing. And it's something we talked to Dale Talon about when he did it, because he drafted Spencer Knight knowing that they had Sergei Bobrovsky in their back pocket for us with a 7-year deal. So they drafted the guy knowing that down the road there might be some problems, but good problems to have. So
yeah, and I guess the thing with Bobrovsky too is that he's shown that he can do it. Right? There's obviously something wrong. Right? Is it a mental thing, whatever? So hopefully they can fix that. I agree. A guy that's really intrigued me over the years, and I think he's a good player, but I guess he's one of those guys that you always want more, is Keith Yandle. Are they pretty happy with him there?
Yes and no. I mean, I think that, when you look at Bill Zito, he wants guys to play up to their contract. And I think Keith Yandle has, because I think he was brought in for a specific reason. Everybody knows who Keith Yandle is, right? He's an offensive-minded defenseman who sometimes gets in trouble in his own zone because that's, just not his game. He's not a guy that's going to hit anybody. Keith Yandle's Keith Yandle, and he's still producing Keith Yandle's stuff. He's the quarterback of the power play, one of the top power plays in the league. He's got 3 or 4 goals this season. He's leading the team with for defensemen, he's got 13 points or something. So he's putting up points. He's creating offense through his play from the back end. He turns the puck over a little too much. He always has. He takes too many penalties. Well, he always has. But he's also doing the things he always does, and that's put up points. So, that's what you brought him here for, and that's what he's doing. So, I don't know why they wouldn't be happy with him.
Yep.
Well, George, it's time to let you go, but we appreciate your time with this. And as you're heading out the door, I'm just going to ask you one thing. You've watched this team a long time. You mentioned last year about how they were sort of Jekyll and Hyde there at the end, and it was hard to understand why. But should we believe in this Panthers team with the changed personnel they have and the combination of Zito and Quenneville in charge?
Yeah, you know what? I think that this team is a contender, for a playoff spot. I know that doesn't mean a whole lot in the places like Pittsburgh and, Philadelphia and stuff. They expect to be a playoff team. But in Florida, just being a playoff contender is kind of a big deal. I like the way this team plays in close games. You watch this team, they don't blow leads. They don't, if they're up a goal, they're probably going to hold on to it. And that hasn't been the case in past years. If they're down a goal, they're coming back. So they've been very good in close games, and I think that's really helped them.
All right. Well, again, thanks for joining us. Hope to have you later in the season when, we're close to the playoffs, and I'm assuming the Panthers will be right there. They've been pretty impressive thus far.
Yeah, we would think. Anyway, thanks, guys.
Thanks, George. Good to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Be good.
All right, that was George Richards of Florida Hockey Now. Line time.
I didn't realize, Kevin, that Florida's got the second best record in the National Hockey League right now.
Yeah, no, I know. Well, they, it was just recently they played Carolina in a game, and at that point, Carolina and Florida were 4-5 in the league in terms of records. And if I had said that to you prior to the season, I think you would have thought that I had been smoking in the back room a little bit, and that that was because I think people thought Carolina was going to be decent, but I don't think they thought they were going to be in a top 5 team like they've been, and nobody anticipated Florida, being up there. And now all of a sudden it's not a lock. Now, I hate to say this because there's nothing wrong with the way Tampa Bay is playing either, but there's, it's not a lock that they're going to win that division.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, they're 4th place right now, and Columbus is really only 2 points behind them. Well, they played a couple more games, but
it's so hard now to read the standings because the games are all screwed up, and you almost have to look at like save percentage. I think for this season, or not save percentage, winning percentage. I think for this season, the standings ought to be listed based on winning percentage.
Yeah, totally. Because it is true. Like Chicago's ahead of them points wise, but the winning percentage are. But Chicago's an interesting story. We talked about Florida being a surprise. Chicago's like the position they're in. Yeah.
Although, Florida seems real to me because of their goal differential. And as he mentioned, they're hitting number 1 in hits. Chicago's a little bit smoke and mirrors. Not that they haven't been impressive, because they have been. But what I'm saying is that you don't look at them and say, wow, they were really a good looking team. They just work hard, and Patrick Kane gets a big goal. They've been opportunistic. They've done well in games that have gone into overtime.
No Taves.
Yeah, they're just getting it done. And they really helped with the players they've added in the off season. I'm drawing a blank now. It's the Suter, Pius Suter, who was the Swiss MVP, is now one of the better rookies. Has done a really good job there as well. And, they still got DeBrincat and Kane. And both of them are pretty dynamic as well. Their defense has been a little more solid. Duncan Keith, I think, is playing better than people wanted to give him credit for, coming into this season. So,
totally. Did we touch on much stuff, the Panarin stuff last show? I think that was kind of happening when we were on the show, right?
Yeah, that's a really a fascinating case. I actually, USA Today called me and asked me to work on a piece on it that I've written, just sort of trying to get just a big picture view of these kinds of things that happen to Russian players. And by that, I mean, the Russian players, for as long as we can remember, have had to deal with things that other players, don't have to deal with. For example, in the 1990s, after the Berlin Wall fell, the Russian mob was everywhere in Russia, and the players that were over here were subject to threats of their loved ones being kidnapped, and I think some of them were. Tverdovsky's mother was kidnapped.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it was a constant thing. It was hard to prove. I interviewed a professor and an expert on Soviet, what was going on, the Russia and the Soviet fall and so forth. And he pointed out that there were numerous FBI investigations, but they often fizzled out because the alleged victims were unwilling to testify. Right. So they've had to deal with that. Coming over here, just in a standard way, it was more difficult for them than, say, Swedish players, because in Sweden they taught English in the schools. There was no English being taught in Russia, so they always had it more difficult. And now, we have the political issues that have cropped up. We have Putin is real invested in the hockey program. He uses it, in my opinion, anyway, as for propaganda. There's a saying in Russia that sports is an extension of foreign policy in Russia. If their sports teams are doing well, it's sort of a good thing. It's a pride thing. It's nationalism and so forth. So these players, don't, a lot of them don't or shouldn't feel comfortable, criticizing the government. But here along comes Panarin, and he is comfortable, and
very comfortable.
Yeah, and he has said that he's not happy with what's going on there, and he's been very intelligent about his criticism. He's specifically, what's going on with the opposition leader who was just thrown in jail, and that was last month. Now it seems more coincidental that a month after that happened, his former coach, a former NHL player named Andrei Nazarov, a guy who was drafted 10th overall by the San Jose Sharks with the expectation that he was going to be a power forward, scoring big goals, playing physical. The goals never came.
Yeah, he's a good player.
He ended up being a tough guy.
Yep.
So he comes out of the NHL and he's not all that happy with, his career. At least this is how it was explained to me. He goes to Russia, and now he would like to get into coaching, but he's not well known over there. So he goes about it by sort of drawing the spotlight to himself by saying a lot of controversial things, and also by being what was referred to as a super patriot. He would say, the KHL is a lot closer to the NHL than people really realize. And,
I didn't know that. Okay, I didn't know that.
And he was really supportive of Putin, and it worked. He drew attention, and then he got to be coaching. And from what I was told, he was actually still a good coach.
Mm-hmm.
He's got teams to perform well. But he's never let that down with regard to being a supporter of Putin, and he's been critical of Panarin. Basically saying, "Hey, look, he's over there earning a good living, taking all the American dollars, and then who is he to be criticizing what's going on in Russia and creating unrest in our great country?" And so now, a month after Panarin criticizes what's happened to the opposition leader and shows his support for him after being put in prison. Now, all of a sudden, Nazarov said 10 years ago, there was a fight in a hotel bar, and Panarin allegedly beat up a young woman. Now, none of us know whether that's true or false. I can't even get into that because, I don't have any way of knowing. So we have to leave that for others to determine, because just because Panarin was targeted doesn't mean the allegation isn't true. We just can't. We have no way of knowing. So we can't.
But they've had nobody substantiate that, though, right?
Yeah, we're gonna get to that. So no one is substantiating. New York Post has written a story where they quoted 3 North American players who were on that team. Said, I never heard that. Now, Tom, you have been in a dressing room.
Yeah.
And if that had happened, everybody in that room would have known it.
Absolutely. That's one of the worst things. I think you would agree. That's one of the worst things a man could ever do is hit a woman. And in the hockey culture, it's just, it shouldn't be allowed anywhere, but he'd get beat up in the locker room for doing that too.
Yeah. Well, and it would be talked about. The next day, even if you weren't there, even if there were only 2 players there when it happened, the next day it would have been all over the dressing room.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
And that's what the 3 players that the New York Post found and interviewed said. I would have heard if that happened, and I never heard that. And one of the guy even made a joke and said, Panarin was 140 some pounds. I'm not sure he could have taken a woman. Back now that was a real inappropriate statement, but. He thought he's kind of helping Panarin when he made that statement by just saying that, everybody said, he really wasn't that kind of guy. So all of that, what do you make of it? And the fact that he had to take a leave of absence, and why is he taking a leave of absence? Well, my conclusion is he's concerned about his family, back in Russia. Like,
okay, but let me up to those. So, I guess, you know what? And I admire him too for taking a stance on, because it's affecting lives over there in Russia, and he obviously cares about his home country. But if your family's over there and you know the way Russia is, why are you being so outspoken and doing all these things? You're going to bring a target.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know him well enough to even comment, but clearly everybody's taking this seriously, and that's why. It's just really difficult. But my take in the story I wrote is that since they've been coming over here since 1988, when Sergei Peryakin went to the Calgary Flames, and that was right in your you probably played against Sergei.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was at the Kings then. Yeah, all the time.
Yeah. And since they've been coming over, it's never been easy for the Russians to come to do that.
I tell you, we were not easy on them either, even as teammates, because I know Thomas Stanstrom is Swedish, obviously, but he came over, couldn't speak English at all, and we were hard on those guys, and we didn't know them, and they couldn't speak to us. We didn't know what they were like as people. It's the same thing with the Russians. So the teams that they play against were hard on them, and their own teammates were hard on them sometimes too.
Yeah, and I got to be honest. I remember, I had been covering the league then for a while when they came over, and not every player was pleased about that.
Yeah, totally. Yep.
Yeah, they didn't want to see Russian players in the league.
It's funny thinking back about that now, how wrong we were to look at it that way. But we were just so used to it being so many Canadians, and then a sprinkling of U.S. players, Swedish players, Finnish players, maybe some Czech players in there. But yeah.
Well, there is an economic issue for a union of these guys were coming in and taking jobs. They had nothing to do with their nationality, but these were the argument for them coming over is they're just more union guys. One union guy replacing another union guy, and you're in a business where you got to earn your job. So I hope this. I hate to say resolved, because I don't know whether you're going to be able to investigate a 10-year-old firefight. The other thing that I'm bothered by, according to Nazarov, Panarin or somebody on Panarin's behalf paid 40,000 euros to make this go away, that there was a police report. Now, unless this young lady was seriously hurt, and I don't know anything about whether this occurred or it didn't occur, but let's give the benefit of the doubt and say it did. Why would anybody have to pay? Like, Panarin was an unknown then. He hadn't been drafted in the NHL. He was 20 years old. He was a 10, 12 goal scorer. He was not a star player. He was a young player. Nobody was talking about Panarin back then. Nobody knew who he was. So why would you have to pay to sweep this under the rug?
Yeah, if it really happened, they would arrest him, throw him off the team. He wasn't really, he wasn't worth it. It wasn't like it was a star player, and if it was a star player and you're getting paid off, it would have been a lot more than $40,000. So that's, it's either zero or a lot more than 40, right? Yeah.
Like none of that makes any sense to me. And everybody you talk to kind of says the same thing. It just kind of smells kind of fishy. So. Yeah. But again, and I think it's important that we say this. We don't have any idea whether it's true or not. And, that's important because, for so many years, women were afraid to come forth when they had legitimate concerns. And this could be legitimate. We have no idea.
And that's a very good point, too. That is a really good point that, the woman involved, obviously, we don't want to discount the story because if it's true, then, it's not fair to her.
Right. It is. So, again, that's why, I hate to just throw in those qualifiers, but, I really feel like you have to.
Yeah, totally.
But anyway.
Claude Julien gets fired in Montreal?
Yeah.
Wow.
That's a big story for me. Just because, boy, they were playing so well at the start of the regular season. Both you and I like the Canadians coming in. I like the moves that were made in the off season, and they, I thought about when George was rattling on about how the Panthers were good, and then all of a sudden the light was switched off, and nobody could understand why. Well, that's what I say about Montreal. They were going guns a-blazing early, and then all of a sudden I've watched them now, and they don't even look like the same team. No confidence.
But my problem with the coach fire is, though, that, I mean, this is a coach that's proven that he's won a Stanley Cup in Boston. Obviously, he was the coach at the start of the year when they're playing so well. Now, why fire the coach? And obviously, it's something we don't know what's going on. Maybe the players felt like, he's lost the old story. He lost the locker room, which I don't put much stock in.
Well, obviously, Claude Julien forgot how to coach. On a Tuesday night, he went to bed, and Wednesday woke up, he couldn't coach it. So, it just happens all the time, and you just, and then you got to fire the guy. If you've forgotten how to coach.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, because it's the simplest way to affect change, and
it is true. Hey, you know what? I shouldn't be surprised. That is the hockey way. I mean, it happens all the time. Yeah. And I hate to say it like this, but Bergeron, the general manager, is going to say, listen, I'm not taking the heat for this. I mean, I put a team together that was playing pretty well. I've got to do something to change things. So, yeah.
That reminds me of the famed New York pitcher, Jim Bouton. I think it's the late Jim Bouton. I think he passed away. But he wrote a book that changed my life called Ball 4. About what was going on inside baseball. Today we're so used to getting all the inside dirt, but back in the late 60s, it was revolutionary when he took us inside the New York Yankees dressing room and talked about things. And he did a less popular sequel to that book called I Manage Well, but Boy, Did They Play Lousy.
Did he really write a book that said that?
Yeah.
That's classic.
And I always, kind of think about that when I hear, GMs talk about, firing a coach when, they don't come out and say it the way that you just did, where, you could Bergeron saying, I put all these great guys in, and look, they're not playing well, but that's what they're saying.
Right.
I manage well, but
it is funny how we, when the team's not doing well, the things they do to try to turn. I remember with Rangers, we had at a playland, our practice facility, and our locker room. We weren't playing well. I believe it was Herb Brooks was coaching. We went through a tough stretch. We had a meeting. We determined that the reason we weren't playing well is because the coach, when he came in, didn't come through the locker room and spend time with us to get to his office. This is our logic. So they changed the locker room around. So Herb had to come through the locker room to get to his office. Well, later on, maybe that year, another year, we were playing bad again. And we determined that the reason we weren't playing well is because the coach was spending too much time in the locker room. And so they changed the locker room again so that he could have access to the office. So when you're doing it as a player, I remember thinking to myself, this makes sense. This is the rationale. This really is why we're not playing well. I think back about it now, and it's just hysterical, really. But that was the logic.
I really appreciated, Bob Johnson, in all the years that I've been covering NHL, was probably my favorite coach. And it's because I liked all the unique things that he did to try to motivate his teams. And when things weren't going well, Bob was always a non-traditionalist. Like, I can't remember what happened, but Calgary was on a losing streak, and they weren't going well. And so he said, had everybody meet at a bowling alley, and they bowled, trying to get the team together. And when they were playing the Oilers, he took everybody up in the last row of the arena, and then he had a team down there and sort of act out what they were doing, because he thought they could, if he explained it while they were watching it below, and they could see it develop, and they would understand, where he's talking, or just stop it. And the other one too, at the World Championships, he didn't have a conference room or any place to hold a team meeting. So the biggest area in a hotel is in that area right outside the elevators. So on the floor the team was on, he sort of set up a miniature rink, and then he had all the players meet down there, and he just put them like pieces on a chessboard, and he have them move. Like, you take 3 steps forward. Now look at the gap here. Look between the 3 guys. And then people would come up off the elevator, and they'd look, and you'd have these 20 guys all standing around trying to play. He'd dress up in practice a goalie to look like Grant Fuhr. And he was one of the most positive human beings. Like I remember Smith. Oh, geez, that's terrible when you get old and you forget first names and stuff.
Was it goaltender?
No, the assistant coach for the Red Wings all those years.
Oh, Barry Smith.
Barry Smith always told the story that when he was in Chicago, as you probably know or would guess, the Penguins were known as a terrible practice team. They didn't enjoy drills and everything. They were this was in the early 90s when Bob was coaching. They had Mario and Yager, and, they liked to throw the puck out and then just get at it. They didn't practice very well, and they had a really poor practice. And Barry Smith said, I came off the ice and I was just disgusted by, the effort, and we just didn't get anything going. And I'm just complaining about the boys. And he said, Bob put his arm around, he goes, Barry, it was just bad ice. The ice was bad, and the boys couldn't get it going. The ice, it was Joey Mullen ice. Joey Mullen ice. It was all chopped up. It was just bad ice. That's all it was, Barry. Just bad ice. The boys will be better tomorrow. It'll be better tomorrow. And Barry said, it says that. So whenever he has a bad practice now, he just thinks, just bad ice. That's
funny. That is good. That's good. It's pretty funny that a coach of his, he's known, I viewed him as a pretty disciplined guy and everything, but him be smart enough to say, well, it's Mario Lemieux and all these guys who were winning all the time, so who cares what the practice is like? Really?
Well, yeah, but he had his way about, he found his way to get messages. One time in the playoffs when Mario was having to have, the equipment guy tie his skates, his back was bad, and there was a thought that they needed to change up Mario's rehab exercises, and they wanted to kind of. Apparently, Mario was resistant, or there was some tale about why he didn't really want to do it or whatever. So one day in practice, and all of a sudden the media is all standing around, and Bob starts out the press conference. He goes, "You boys ever go to the zoo? Do you go to the zoo?" Everybody's looking like, yeah, we've been to zoos. He goes, a lion, he said, king of the beast. He said, when a lion wakes up, what's the first thing he does? Do you ever watch the lion when he wakes up? First thing he does, he stretches. He stretches, he stretches, he stretches. It's good enough for the king of the beast. It should be good enough for all of us. We can learn from watching the animals. We can learn that we need to take care of our bodies. We need to stretch. Now, it didn't take long for us to realize that message was not for the overweight members of the media. That was for Mario Lemieux. That was his way of, sending a message. So, he just had a way. And the other thing I remember too was Bob announcing to the media that the doctors, Paul Coffey had taken I think it was a big hit. I don't recall actually what the episode was, but it seemed like it was a career-threatening injury the way they approached it. And the next day of practice, Bob comes in and says that the team doctor has cleared Paul Coffey to only play on the power play. And so I ran into Bob later, and everybody wrote it down like it was gospel. And I knew Bob well. And I said to Bob, only cleared to play on the power play, Bob. Come on. And he just smiled at me. He just laughed. I said, you wanted Paul Coffey to only play on the power play, not the team doctor. So, but he was such a positive guy. He was never had a bad day, Bob Johnson. It was, he
coined the phrase, it's a great day for hockey, right? Isn't that his phrase?
Yeah. I remember one of my favorite quotes from him. As in USA, had gotten beat by, I think it was Norway in the World Juniors. It was a team that we should have beaten as a country of 300 million people. And I called Bob on the phone to ask him about it because, it was such an upset that it was worth writing about. And he said, Kevin, you'd think in a country of 300 million people, we could find one kid who could play goal. And that was a mistake. But it was one of my all-time favorite quotes. In a country of 300 million people.
So where would Herb Brooks rank as far as quotes with the?
He was tremendous. I loved talking to Herbie. He knew that I appreciated, good quotes and the use of language. And, he used to talk to me all the time about that. He knew the first week that he was in television that he was not going to be good on television because, as he said, they'd ask me what time it is, and
Yes.
I'd want to tell him how to build a.
He said that to me one time. I asked him, "How's the TV going?" He said that exact same quote. He had a quote he used, and he would say things like, "Well, you know what? There's hewers of wood and carriers of water." And he'd say that to a bunch of hockey players. We're all like, "What?"
Yeah. Some people paint. Some people have to carry the paint. For sure. I mean, they all have that. The Lou Lamoriello one was the orchestra. For an orchestra to make beautiful music, everybody's got to do their part, and some people got to beat the drum, and some people got to carry the tuba. Not everybody can play the violin.
That's true. The old school guys said, what would they say? The guy came in as a crusher, he tried to be a rusher, and he became an usher.
Yeah. No, I heard that one before too. They used to, there are certain themes back in that era of hockey that didn't change, and one of them is that guys would come in and make their mark as tough guys, but you get weary of that. Like, that's not a fun job.
No,
it weighs on you mentally and everything else. So they'd have some success and get some goals, and then they'd convince themselves that they could be goal scorers, and then oh boy.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing, and they could still be a decent player, but the fact that they would prove that they could do the role of the tough guy, the coaches wanted that, right? So if they weren't going to do that role anymore, like, they need somebody. Right? It is interesting to talk to the old guys now that are tough guys and realize how little they liked doing that job. Right? There's very few guys really enjoy doing that job. You didn't know that when you were playing, but that's the case.
Well, in journalism, we used to say, don't show any aptitude for being a good copy editor. Because, boy, they'll stick you on that copy desk. You'll never get off because they're hard to find. Good copy editors are hard to find. And, I was fortunate because I had no aptitude to be a copy editor. So I never had to worry about that. All right. Well, we've gone a long time today with our storytelling hour. But we'll be back next week with another show. In the meantime, tune in HockeyDebates.com podcast with Bob Duff on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 4 p.m. And I also am writing for HockeyBuzz.com, and I appear on the Hockey Buzzcast on Fridays at 1 o'clock. And Tom, tell everybody where they can hear this.
Listen to the radio version of our show at radio.co at 365 Sports. Again, that's radio.co at 365 Sports. All right, everybody. We'll see you next Monday.